The coffee hadn't even cooled when Caleb Monroe noticed the silence. Not the peaceful kind that fills a quiet morning, but the eerie, hollow stillness of something gone wrong. The bed beside him was empty, not unmade empty. The drawers were ajar. The closet hung open like a broken rib cage, and in the middle of it all stood a suitcase, half packed, half forgotten, as if someone had fled a burning house. Julian Frost wasn't fleeing flames. He was abandoning a life. Caleb stood frozen in the doorway, one hand still holding the corner of his robe. His husband, his partner of over a decade, was zipping up the suitcase without looking up. There were no explanations, no goodbyes, not even a guilty glance. Only the cold, mechanical movements of someone who had already left in his mind. "What are you doing?" Caleb asked, barely above a whisper. Julian didn't flinch. "What I should have done years ago." That sentence hit harder than betrayal. It erased birthdays, anniversaries, lazy Sunday mornings, and quiet evenings reading together. It erased their vows. Caleb didn't scream, didn't beg. He watched, speechless, as Julian walked past him and out the door, not bothering to close it behind him. It wasn't just the man who left. It was everything they had built. Caleb moved through the day in a fog, numb but functional. He couldn't afford to fall apart. Not when their son, Eli, would be home from school in a few hours. He needed answers. Maybe Julian had transferred money to another account for a reason. Maybe this was temporary. Maybe there was still a trace of the man he married in that suitcase. He logged into their joint bank account, an account they had slowly, carefully filled over the years. Birthday gifts, tax refunds, freelance checks. Every dollar saved for Eli's future had been poured into that fund. 12 years of planning for one dream college, but the balance glared back at him zero. Julian hadn't just left. He'd taken everything. By the time Eli walked in from school, Caleb had managed to smile, to prepare dinner, to pretend that the world hadn't tilted on its axis. But the boy didn't ask where Julian was. He didn't cry. He didn't even blink. Instead, Eli looked at his father with a calm, so unsettling, it was almost adult. "Don't worry, Dad," he said, placing his backpack gently on the hook by the door. "I handled it." Then he disappeared into his room, as if nothing had changed. Caleb stood in the hallway long after Eli closed the door, the words echoing in his mind like a code he didn't yet know how to crack. Handled it. What could a 12-year-old possibly mean by that? But there was something else in that moment. Something Caleb couldn't quite name. Not just maturity, not defiance. It was control. Not the desperate kind that comes from fear, but the deliberate stillness of someone who had already begun to build a response. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. The other side of the bed remained cold. The silence in the house was now deeper, heavier. He lay awake listening to the soft, rhythmic tapping of keys from Eli's room. It was faint, but constant. Tap, pause, tap, tap, pause. It was a sound that didn't belong in a child's world. And yet Caleb knew, in the marrow of his bones, that something had shifted. That morning, he'd lost a husband. But maybe, just maybe, he was about to learn exactly who his son really was. If this story speaks to you, if you've ever had to rebuild from a broken trust or found unexpected strength in someone, small follow heart story for more. These aren't just stories, they're mirrors. And sometimes what reflects back might surprise you, because sometimes the ones we think need protection are already saving us. The days that followed were marked by an unnerving calm. Caleb Monroe moved through his routines like a man swimming through a dream, watching, listening, trying not to disturb the strange new order that had quietly settled over the house. But something was different, not just in the silence Julian had left behind, but in Eli. The boy no longer asked about his father. He didn't cry, didn't lash out, didn't show any outward sign of grief or confusion. Instead, he disappeared into his room after dinner each night and stayed there for hours, the quiet hum of his laptop filtering faintly beneath the door. At first, Caleb told himself it was distraction. Perhaps Eli was playing games or watching videos to escape what had happened, but the glow beneath the door lasted deep into the night, and the soft rhythm of typing never sounded idle. It was purposeful, persistent. One night, just after midnight, Caleb crept quietly into the hallway. The light still burned. The typing hadn't stopped. Guilt warred with curiosity. He hesitated, then knocked softly. "Eli," he asked, barely loud enough to carry. The typing ceased instantly. A pause, then the sound of the chair shifting, the laptop shutting. "I'm just finishing homework," Eli called back evenly, but the voice didn't match the contentment of a child working on math problems. It was composed, unshaken, too controlled. The next afternoon, Caleb came home early from the library. He walked quietly past Eli's open door, meaning only to check in. What he saw stopped him cold. Eli sat with his back straight, eyes fixed on a dual monitor setup he had somehow constructed using old parts from Caleb's storage. On one screen was a spreadsheet, on the other a live feed from a computer in a different location. A name flickered in the corner of the window, Julian Frost. Caleb didn't speak. He watched. Lines of code ran across the bottom of the screen. Eli's fingers moved confidently across the keyboard, navigating what looked like banking portals, internal servers, and document repositories. When the boy sensed his father behind him, he didn't flinch. He simply closed the second screen and turned around. "I'm not doing anything illegal," he said. Caleb couldn't find words. Eli turned the monitor back to the spreadsheet, then pointed. "This is where he moved the money, not to a savings account. He used my name, my social security number." The words were sharp, clinical. Caleb sat down slowly, trying to absorb what he was hearing. He applied for a home equity loan. Eli continued. "Using our warehouse as collateral. But it's not just that. He forged my guardianship certification to appear as an adult cosigner." A dull roar grew in Caleb's ears. He wanted to scream, to storm out and confront Julian. But all he could do was whisper. Why? Eli clicked another tab. A photo appeared. Julian was smiling beside a man Caleb had never seen, tall, handsome, exuding a kind of polished arrogance. Under the photo was a name, Blake Harrington. "He's starting a new life with him," Eli said, his voice now a whisper. "They plan to use the loan to buy a property in Seattle, but Blake doesn't know he used my identity." Caleb sat frozen. This was no longer a child's imagination or speculation. This was real, documented, proven, and Eli had uncovered it all. "How did you even—" Caleb's voice trailed. Eli looked at him with eyes that had seen too much for their age. "You always told me to pay attention. You just didn't know how much I was listening." In that moment, Caleb's grief gave way to something more complex. Pride. Yes, but also sorrow. His son had absorbed betrayal not with tears but with silence and strategy. He had found comfort not in arms but in firewalls and encryption. He should have been learning to ride a bike down the street or building school projects with glue and paper. But instead, Eli was building cases, hunting down betrayal, and covering wounds with fireproof logic. Caleb wanted to hold him, to tell him he didn't have to carry this. But he didn't, because the boy sitting before him had already decided he would. And in doing so, he reminded Caleb of something deeper, that the instinct to protect doesn't always wear the face of innocence. Sometimes it wears resolve. Sometimes it types through the night. In that quiet room filled with the soft hum of machines, Caleb realized what many parents never do in time. Some children don't scream when they're in pain, they solve. And if you don't look closely enough, you'll mistake silence for healing when it's actually a battle in progress. It began quietly, just as Eli had. There was no spectacle, no storm of confrontation, no declarations of revenge. Only a boy with steady hands and a mind that had mapped out every move like pieces on a chessboard. Caleb watched from the background, powerless and stunned, as the storm began to unfold not around them, but around Julian Frost. The first crack came 3 days later. Blake Harrington, the man from the photo, was suspended from his financial consulting firm pending a full investigation. An anonymous tip had reached his company's internal compliance team. The evidence was detailed screenshots of transactions, timestamps, documentation of identity fraud, even voice recordings of calls Blake didn't know had been saved. Nothing linked Blake directly to the fraud, but he had benefited from it, and in the financial world, that was enough. Julian called home the next morning. His voice, once always composed and confident, now carried an edge of panic. "Caleb, something's going on. My accounts are frozen. I can't access anything. My emails at work, they're gone. I think someone's targeting me." Caleb didn't speak, but beside him, Eli was already walking toward the phone. He took the receiver gently, cradling it with a calmness that no child should have to know. "You stole my future," Eli said, his voice low. "Now I'm protecting it." And then he hung up. Julian didn't call back. Later that week, a certified letter arrived from the Credit Monitoring Bureau. It notified Caleb that a fraud investigation had been opened regarding the unlawful use of Eli Monroe Frost's identity in multiple financial applications. Attached were copies of forged documents. Julian's signature appeared again and again, next to Eli's name. Eli didn't seem triumphant. He didn't glow with satisfaction or seek praise. He simply continued with his routine school, chores, quiet evenings. But the laptop stayed open longer each night, and the darkness in his eyes grew deeper. Concern. Caleb took him to see Dr. Melanie Vasquez, a specialist in child cognitive behavior. Eli agreed without resistance. After 3 sessions, she invited Caleb into her office alone. "Your son is exceptional," she said gently. "He's what we classify as hyper-perceptive, a child with advanced pattern recognition, abstract reasoning, and executive processing far beyond his age." Caleb sat still. "But more than that," she continued, "he's using these abilities as a shield. His emotional response to trauma is cognitive control. Instead of crying, he investigates. Instead of seeking comfort, he builds strategies. It's not wrong, it's survival." Caleb lowered his head, fingers tightening around the fabric of his sleeves. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. "He's not angry. He's trying to restore order. In his mind, betrayal disrupted the equation. He's doing what his brain tells him will fix it." Caleb understood then. Eli's mission wasn't vengeance. It was justice. Not out of spite, but because he couldn't tolerate the idea that someone could hurt him and walk away clean. His silence, his control. It wasn't the absence of emotion. It was the language of pain rendered in logic. Caleb sat in the car for a long time before starting the engine. He looked over at Eli, who was staring out the window. Headphones in, a peaceful expression across his face. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. And in that quiet space between them, Caleb realized something that should never be forgotten. Some children grow up too soon, not because they choose to, but because the world forces them to. And when they stand up not just for themselves, but for what's right, it's not rebellion, it's resilience. The storm had passed, at least on the surface. Julian's plans lay in ruins, his accounts frozen, his reputation fractured, his future uncertain. But inside the quiet Portland home where Caleb and Eli lived, the atmosphere didn't feel like victory. There were no celebrations, no cheers of justice served, just quiet breakfasts, books left open beside tea mugs, and the soft hum of Eli's laptop still active long after nightfall. Caleb noticed a shift not in Eli's posture, which remained straight, or in his routine, which remained disciplined, but in his focus. The files that had once been about Blake and Julian were gone from his desktop. In their place were folders labeled things like Granite Falls Widow, Northbrook Guardianship, Case New Jersey Minor Fraud. Each day, new names. Each night, more typing. One evening, Caleb lingered in the hallway, listening. He knocked once, then entered. Eli didn't look up from the screen. They're using her daughter's Social Security to open cards in 5 different states. She's 63 and doesn't even know what a credit score is. I found the shell companies already reported them to the FTC. Caleb sat quietly watching the boy work. They trust the people around them, Eli continued, still typing. Husbands, kids, nephews, and they get ruined because no one checks. No one fights back. Caleb leaned back in the chair beside the desk. You're still a child. Eli, I'm a child who knows how to stop this. And he did. Within weeks, Eli had launched a platform called Digital Honor, a quiet, unobtrusive website with no ads, no tracking, no fees, just a few fields. Tell us what happened. Upload proof. We'll verify. We'll act. Caleb watched in awe as the messages trickled in. Elderly women confused by bills they didn't remember approving. Fathers whose names had been used to sign leases they never saw. Teenagers who found themselves thousands in debt before their 18th birthday. Eli didn't take credit. He didn't even use his full name. He signed every email with the initials D.H. and built systems that blurred his identity. He didn't want attention. He wanted results. By the end of the first month, Digital Honor had quietly resolved more than a dozen cases. By the third month, it had helped nearly 100 families reverse fraudulent loans, stop credit abuse, and file legal claims. Eli was invited to speak at cybersecurity webinars, offered internships at firms he hadn't even applied to. He declined them all. I don't want to make money off people's fear, he said one night while they sat at the kitchen table. I just want them to have someone who sees what's happening before it's too late. Caleb nodded, the tea between his hands growing cold. The boy who had once said, "Don't worry, I handled it," had gone beyond repairing his own future. He was protecting futures he'd never even see. There was no bitterness in his work, no pride either, just purpose, and a kind of empathy that Caleb had only seen in those who had known injustice firsthand. That night, Caleb stood by Eli's bedroom door longer than usual. He wanted to say something meaningful, but no words seemed worthy. So he just watched as his son adjusted his glasses and returned to the screen, the blue light flickering softly across his young face. And Caleb knew some children do not wait for the world to become kinder. They become the reason it does. Julian Frost returned with the look of a man who had run out of places to hide. His tailored suits were gone, replaced by a loose coat that hung off his frame. The sharp confidence in his voice had long since dulled, worn down by months of public scrutiny and private humiliation. He had lost his job. His partnership with Blake had imploded when the truth came out. The house they were planning to buy had been pulled from escrow. Legal investigations trailed him from city to city like shadows too stubborn to be outrun. And still he came back not with pride, but with a plea. It was a gray afternoon when he knocked on the door of the Portland house he once called home. Caleb opened it and stood wordless, frozen in a silence too layered for any greeting. "I'm not here to make excuses," Julian said quietly. "I just want to see him. One time." Caleb didn't nod, didn't argue. He stepped aside. Inside, the air felt thick with memories that no longer belonged to anyone. Eli sat at the kitchen table, a cup of cocoa in front of him, unread. When he looked up, his expression didn't shift. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was something far heavier: clarity. Julian sat across from him. The once pristine man now looked smaller, not in stature but in presence. "I came to say I'm sorry," he said. "I know it doesn't fix anything, but you were just a boy, and I did something no father should ever do." Eli reached beneath the table and pulled out an envelope. He placed it gently between them. Julian stared at it. "I don't need your money," he whispered. "It's not for you." Eli replied, "Open it." Inside was a bank card. On the back, taped carefully, was a printed balance sheet. The number $75,000. "I rebuilt the fund," Eli said. "Not for myself. For the next kid someone like you tries to ruin." Julian's breath caught. Eli didn't blink. "One day, that money will go to someone whose future was taken before they even had a chance to dream. You don't get to know their name, but you'll know your name isn't on the damage anymore." Julian crumpled, not from the weight of accusation, but from the unshakable grace of the child he had failed. He slid from the chair to his knees, tears soaking the floor beneath him. "I don't deserve forgiveness." "I didn't say you did," Eli answered softly, and that was all. Julian stood eventually. He didn't ask for more. He didn't linger. He simply walked out into the grayness, his figure shrinking with every step away from the house that no longer held a place for him. When the door shut behind him, Caleb moved to his son's side. He didn't speak. Instead, he pulled Eli into a quiet, wordless embrace. Later that night, Caleb asked him why he had done it. Why not just let the past rot? Eli answered without looking up. "Because justice matters, but so does legacy. If I couldn't undo what he did to me, I could at least make sure it didn't happen to someone else." And in that moment, Caleb knew his son hadn't just survived betrayal. He had transformed it into something dignified, into something powerful, into something no one could take back. So now let me ask you, if it were your child, would you have seen it? Would you have understood the silence before the storm? Tell us in the comments. And if this story moved you, share it. Subscribe to Heart Story, where we don't just tell stories. We honor the people who live them.